So you're scrolling through World of Tanks thinking that you've had enough of being derped by a ton of derp cannons, and you're thinking that it's been so annoying playing tier 10 at the minute because of the AVREs and stuff that we have in the game and the high alpha tanks. So you're thinking, maybe I can learn a different style of tank, one that might be quite hidden. And that's exactly what today's video is all about, is that trying out a few new vehicles. And of course, today's video is a little bit of a hidden gem that I think a lot of people get wrong within World of Tanks console, and it will teach you a ton about how to play the game. Now, that tank happens to be one of the most stealthiest vehicles that you can get in the game, not only because it has a really good concealment, but also because of the fact that it is sitting with a very nice main armament that is able to do a ton of damage, and it happens to be American as well and can be used as a crew trainer. And what's even better is because it is a lower tier vehicle, you don't have to spend a ton of money to be able to purchase this one in the game. It is a premium tank, and it's one of my favourite tier 7s in the game, the M56 Scorpion. Now, this tank is a little rat. It is an absolute monster when you use it properly, and we've got some gameplays coming up that are going to showcase this and how you can use a tank like this, how you can kind of think about things within your games, and how you play a tank that basically is like this. But I guess we should really talk about why you would want to play a tank like this. This is, of course, the M56 Scorpion. It's an American tier 7 tank destroyer, and by no means am I saying that you have to play this vehicle, but it's more about playing kind of slightly off-peak vehicles that aren't necessarily the most common ones that you're going to see in the game, whether that be at tier 10, whether that be at tier 4. It's all about kind of enjoying the game, and that's what I'm trying to promote on the channel, and really just giving a lot of tanks different names. And at the end of the day, it's mainly about the person driving the tank, not necessarily the tank itself. And for me personally, after playing thousands, if not tens of thousands of games on World of Tanks console, the best tanks that I find are the ones that are a bit nuanced, that are a bit different, and certainly not the overpowered ones, because, you know, a lot of the time you can contribute to your team quite well with overpowered vehicles, but you don't feel like you've done a whole lot yourself. It's more about the tank that you're playing rather than the individual, even if you've had a stellar game. But the M56 Scorpion, no one is ever going to say that this tank is overpowered. It certainly has its drawbacks, and there are quite a few of them. But the whole point is that this tank is very good if you know how to play this style of tank. And the whole point in making videos like this, like I've said, is that you get to know and learn the game better, which when you come to playing your overpowered tanks, you're going to play a hell of a lot better, and you're going to take your games where you're dealing 3,000, 4,000 damage, all the way up to 5,000, 6,000, 8,000, you know, even pushing 10,000 if you're playing in tier 10 games. And playing tanks that are less well known and less popular, less overpowered, is going to teach you the core things about the game, which I feel a lot of people have been kind of throwing to the wayside, playing all of the new OP tanks that come out every time and not really understanding how to play the game properly. So that's exactly what this video is going to be about, and hopefully it's a good review of the M56 Scorpion alongside, and hopefully you'll learn something, or maybe you just enjoy watching a game where we have an excellent result in a tier 7 tank destroyer with absolutely no armor. And that is the key thing about the M56 Scorpion. It's a vehicle that is basically a walking, talking main armament, but has absolutely nothing in regards to its armor. And in fact, the best bit about the tank, and the best and thickest part of the vehicle, is the hull, which has 15mm of armor. And as you can guess, tier 4 tanks with HE rounds can almost pen you every single time with, you know, 15mm of penetration on a HE round. So you would get absolutely pummeled if you didn't understand how to use this tank, and that is something that you can learn. And in fact, knowing that you cannot take hits is going to make you play better in tanks where you can take hits, because not only are you going to be actually bouncing damage when you can, but you're also going to be avoiding damage at the same time, making those armored vehicles much better. So sometimes, even though it's counterintuitive, or what you might think of playing a tank with no armor to learn tanks out with armor, it's going to save you a lot of hit points in the long run, and you're going to play much better in the game. At least from my own experience of playing the game, I'm sure there are people out there that will absolutely play worse if you do decide to play kind of lower kind of armored vehicles, and maybe you won't learn that much. But for the brief and vast majority of people, as kind of a brief explanation, you are going to learn a lot by playing tanks like this. And if your intention is to get better or just have good games, then hopefully this video is going to be for you. So stay tuned, because there's a lot to unpack in this video, even if the gameplay portions are quite small, as we did play on the 7 versus 7 mode, but you'll see very good damage coming out of a 7 versus 7, considering that there isn't actually that many hit points in each of the games. So that is part of the lucky event game mode, and of course we did that live on stream. So we've run through all of that sort of stuff. I'm going to be doing streams for 30 days in a row, every single day, probably between 4 o'clock GMT to 6, half 6, maybe even 7 o'clock. So we're looking to stream about 2 hours a day for about 30 days. And hopefully you can kind of learn a thing or two if you do want to watch that, and you can join in. But either way, the M56 Scorpion, why is this tank so good? Well, obviously we've covered the armor. The main armament of this vehicle is what it's all about. I mean, it is a walking, talking main armament, so it has 240 damage per shell. It gets a 219 penetration on its standard rounds, which for a tier 7 vehicle is very, very good. So you don't even need premium rounds in a lot of the games that you're going to be playing. It also gets 275mm of penetration with its premium rounds, which is very, very powerful for when you're coming into those kind of heavily armored vehicles a higher tier than you. And even better about this vehicle is that the 275 pen can deal with a lot of the tier 9s that you'll face. It is not a preferential matchmaking tank. It plays all the way up to tier 9. So you are going to be facing vehicles that are higher tier than you, and this one really doesn't matter. And the whole point is to try and learn how to not take hits and avoid damage, rather than trying to take hits and, you know, being spotted all of the time. And camo is one of the most underrated things in the game, which is why playing a tank with incredible camo is going to enable you to learn a lot about how to use it properly, and an M56 Scorpion is a good way of doing that, in my opinion. So with that being said, we're running the tank with a camo build. There's a surprise. On one of the more stealthy vehicles, we're running a camo build, and that's to make it absolutely broken, in that, you know, you can sit in a bush and you can spot people. You can even fire in the bush without getting spotted. I'll tell you how you can kind of make it even more effective as well, using some of the perks. And you can see here we've got advanced optics and we've got advanced concealment. Now, advanced concealment reduces how detectable your vehicle is, so you don't want to run this on all of your heavy tanks, etc. It's not necessary, because you're going to be up close and personal when you're playing in heavies. But some lightly armoured vehicles will really benefit from using camo, and it's actually quite an underrated thing, considering that the equipment diversity within console is not actually that much. Like, there is very much a case that often you won't really need to use many variations of equipment when you're playing any of your tanks. Mostly every single vehicle that I will run will have advanced loader, it will most likely have advanced optics, and then the real kind of ditching point, depending on the tank class, is advanced concealment. And advanced concealment is essentially a way of boosting up my ability to spot others without getting spotted. And World of Tanks console, in how it currently plays, is very much a battle of view range as to how you can perform really well and deal more damage without taking any damage in return, and then later on you can kind of play more aggressive and you can actually get spotted a little bit more, and so that's kind of how you run a tank with no armor, or a tank that you are trying to get a lot of damage early on without really risking a whole lot. So that's kind of how we're running this tank. Now, there isn't a huge diversity in the equipment, especially on this, because you cannot take vertical stabilizers on this tank, and so the only real other equipment piece that I would be somewhat inclined to get on a vehicle like this would be something like traction system. So we could swap out advanced concealment and go with traction system, but the benefit of getting extra speed is not really there for a vehicle like this, because at the end of the day, the whole point is you stay undetected and maneuver around the battlefield with very good speed actually on this tank, 45 kilometers an hour base, and so you can often relocate quite easily. It's very nice to be able to do it. And the kind of top forward speed 45, reverse speed 17. And having extra speed not really going to do a whole lot for you. So this is kind of the build that I would recommend to absolutely everyone playing this vehicle, regardless of maybe you want a bit more speed. it's not really worth it. We're running it with a premium repair kit. We're running it with a standard med kit because, I mean, at the end of the day, most of the time if you're getting hit in this tank, you're probably going to get taken out anyway. So you haven't got a whole lot of hit points, only 820. So if you're taking a lot of hits, you're probably already removed, at which point having an extra 10,000 silver per game paying for that is probably not that much worth it. And then we've got enhanced rations for the best boost that you could possibly get in the game, to be honest, just based on a consumable. So yeah, enhanced ration, almost a must. I would very rarely ever take fire extinguisher in any of my vehicles because at the end of the day, we're trying to avoid hits, not take them, and usually you have to take a hit to get set on fire. And if you're taking less hits overall because you're using better kind of enhanced rations, you're not going to get set on fire as often anyway. So that's kind of how I run vehicles, and I think about it like that rather than if I do get set on fire, that occasional time. It does happen and it can ruin you. But for the most part, it's very rare that you get set on fire consistently enough to warrant taking out another piece of equipment that's vital to your tank and is going to be benefiting you every single game. So that's kind of how I think about things when it comes to my equipment loadout and my consumable is it going to benefit me all of the time, or is it only going to be very situational? And so, yeah, the thing that benefits me all of the time, probably going to be worth it. So that's how we've run this tank. We've got 15 premium ammunition in this vehicle because, as I said, standard pen is actually not bad. The premium is heat ammo. So it's good for those heavily armoured vehicles, but a little bit annoying against tracks and stuff like that. So you have to be a little bit on it with regards to which ammo type that you're using at certain vehicles. If it's the side, you don't want to be firing heat because you're more likely to hit the tracks. But if it's the front, heat is a very nice option for vehicles. So that's kind of how you can use just the pure statistics and stuff of the vehicle, how you can set it up in the best way. And of course, commander perks will be a big thing for a vehicle like this. Now, we are running, of course, this is in no particular order as to which ones I would get first, but this is all of the perks that I would recommend getting on the vehicle. So straight off the bat, we're getting Sixth Sense. This is the biggest and most important, most crucial, most beneficial perk you can ever have on any vehicle. I would get this every single time, every tank in the game, regardless of if you're playing a heavy tank. Maybe not an artillery piece, but that doesn't really count anyway. But yeah, Sixth Sense, biggest thing that you could possibly get in the game. It is going to give you so much information, and World of Tanks is an information-based game. The more information you know, the better you can make a decision as to what you need to do next. And if you don't have that information, Sixth Sense, by not having it, you're going to lose out on a lot of damage. You're going to take hits that you didn't necessarily know about. And yeah, that's kind of how Sixth Sense will work, and we'll get into that in the gameplay so I can kind of showcase why it is important, because there is a key difference between Sixth Sense and your normal kind of targeting in the game, and we'll get into the nitty gritty of that in the gameplay portion. But we've then got Born Leader. This is a big boost to your skill effectiveness and also your crew performance. Skill effectiveness is based on, you see that we've got 10% increase to accuracy with steady aim. When we have Born Leader, the 10% is applied to the 10%, and as the laws of kind of fractions, it will be 10% of 10% equals 1%. So you'll get an additional 1% to accuracy by having Born Leader. This applies to every single perk, so if you've got bonus perks, so things like Rapid Loading will get an additional 1%, Steady Aim will get an additional 1%, Situational Awareness will get an additional 0.6%, Camo Expertise will get an additional 1%, Silent Driving will get an additional 5.5%, you get the drift. I think you guys can probably work it out at this point. So Born Leader, very important. And crew performance is also within that category, whereby now you're going to actually have better crew statistics, whereby you can repair your tracks faster, you can spot people further away. You're going to have a huge gain from having Born Leader. Probably the best secondary skill that you can get out of the lot. So Sixth Sense, Born Leader, that's what I would run. And then we have Steady Aim for increased accuracy. It's just a 10% flat boost to accuracy, which is very powerful in a game where you have to hit weak points and there's RNG involved. So minimizing as much RNG is going to allow you to play as good as possible. Rapid Loading, obviously 10% better DPM, going to allow you to fire quicker, get more damage in a shorter period of time. big things for playing in a tank destroyer that relies upon dealing damage and taking people out before you take too many hits that you get taken out. So that's kind of how rapid loading will be beneficial. We got situational awareness. This is for increased view range. We want to spot people, and having that is almost a must on every single tank. You'll just basically be able to spot people from further away, and it is going to be very useful in those situations. We've got camo expertise. This gives you a 10% increase to your vehicle's camo factor. So how that actually applies is that when you go to this screen here, your still concealment is 193. If I take it off, it's going to be somewhere in the region of about 210. So it is how the kind of still concealment is affected when you use camo expertise. So it just makes it harder for people to detect you. And if you can stay undetected as opposed to being spotted, you're not going to take any hits for the most part. You can get blind fired, but it very rarely happens because most people on this game don't realize that if they're seeing a tracer from the same spot, that they could actually shoot where the tracer is. Funny that. But either way, you can see that muffled shot is here, 35% increase to shooting camo factor. So this is essentially when you fire, you're more likely to get spotted because the circle at which your detectability range will increase after the period at which you fire. So as soon as you fire, your camo gets worse for a small period of time, and that's going to allow people to spot you during that period of time. So if we can reduce how much that circle gets bigger, we're going to be able to stay hidden better in a tank like this, which at the end of the day, when you don't have any armor and you have very little hit points, staying undetected is going to be a big thing. And so that is why we've got muffled shot on here. And because of the fact that we're firing so often with this vehicle, because it has a really small reload compared to a lot of the other tanks with higher alpha, you are going to be able to, make use of this a lot more. It's about constant use of this thing. It's going to be very good. And so that's why we use it in some of our vehicles, especially medium tanks, especially tanks with lower kind of, alpha damage where you're firing a lot more. It's going to be more useful and easily useful on some of the higher alpha TDs as well, and medium tanks as well, and heavies sometimes. But heavies, not so much because you're often spotted anyway. So it's less of a beneficial thing. So muffled shot, really nice to have. We've got green thumb, which increases our vehicle's camo factor when in foliage. So if we're in a bush, we get an additional 10% decrease to our still concealment, which allows us to stay hidden much better. And essentially, the vehicle's camo factor when you're in a bush is only effective when you're in a bush. So this is probably the least, effective perk out of a lot of them, in my opinion, because you have to be in a bush and you're not always in a bush, whereas all of the other perks, they work regardless of whether you're in a bush or whether you're like moving around the field. Whatever happens, the other perks are in effect, whereas a green thumb only works when you're in a bush. So that is why it's useful to have in tanks where you know that you're going to be playing a little bit more passively. That's why I would use it. But if I was going to be very critical and maybe take out this perk, you definitely could, and you could replace it with something else. So that's kind of the slot at which could be quite variable. But for me, in a tank like this, definitely suited to having green thumb, just for the case in which you get into green foliage maps where you can essentially sit in bushes and stuff like that and use them to your advantage and just avoid getting detected by light tanks and stuff like that. And then we have silent driving. Now, silent driving, once again, a very important crew skill that is going to essentially allow you to decrease the effect of driving on your vehicle's camo factor. Now, for those of you that don't know, what this means is much like when you fire, you get the bloom of the radius, a bigger circle at which you're going to get spotted in. The same occurs when you're driving in vehicles that aren't light tanks or heavy tanks. Heavy tanks always have the maximum. They do not get a reduction when they're stationary. It doesn't matter whether you're driving or whether you're kind of on the move. Light tanks are kind of the opposite. They get the minimum whether they're driving or whether they're on the move. They're still the maximum, if that makes sense. But of course their maximum is a lot smaller and is essentially the same as a minimum of a medium tank and a tank destroyer. So silent driving is very good for either medium tanks or tank destroyers. This is going to allow you to essentially move around the map a lot easier without getting spotted and without having that kind of bloom on that circle, so it doesn't get as big, so you're not going to get spotted as often when you're moving around the map. And in a tank where you're trying to play like camo and learn camo, this is going to be very, very good for you guys to actually kind of learn that and make it a little bit easier. Now, when you get used to camo, it's probably less useful, and maybe you could use some other things. But for me, a 55% decrease to the effect of driving is going to be pretty massive for remaining a sneaky tank destroyer, and it's very, very good. So that's kind of how I use this tank. And yeah, heavy tanks can use it, but it is a lot less effective from my understanding of what it is. Maybe some of you can understand it better. Maybe you know about it. Maybe it just decreases just moving and stationary. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure it's very ineffective on heavy tanks based on what we've already talked about. So that's the setup that we're going with. There is very little need for anything else. We have a turret on this tank, but it is not a fully traversable turret. It only has an arc of 45 degrees, I believe, off the top of my head. No, it's 30 degrees, so you can go 60 degrees. So you can't quite make a full 180. So you can go 30 degrees to the right, 30 degrees to the left. It's not a big problem because the traverse speed of the hull on this tank is actually very good. And the dispersion when you're moving that hull, so how worse the accuracy gets when you're moving the hull armor of the vehicle, so turning, it's not actually that bad. So it makes it very good, alongside the fact that your aiming time, so how long it takes to aim, is very low as well. So that's kind of how you can use it to your advantage. The damage per minute, as we've currently got it set up, is 2,500, which is very good for a tier 7. It's not the pinnacle, but it's good considering how much alpha that you deal with this tank, 240, which puts it in line with a lot of other vehicles, and you're going to see a considerable increase over some of the heavy tanks that you'll see at the same tier. For example, the T29, 1900 damage per minute and takes quite a while to reload, whereas the M56 has an additional 500 and yeah, it's just a much better main armament as well. So 0.27 accuracy to go alongside that good aim time as well. So 5-second reload, very stealthy. That's what this tank's all about, and I really wanted to go in depth with this one just to show you exactly how to play a tank that is kind of better for camo and how you can learn about it so you're better educated for when you're playing up against tanks like this and also when you're playing them. So let's jump into the gameplay and I'll kind of explain what I did in the battles that we have. So the first battle that we do have is on Mountain Pass. As I said earlier, this is in the 7 versus 7 mode, and it works very much like any other mode in the game. It's a team destruction. There's no cap circle or anything like that. So it's just purely who takes out the enemy team first. So it's all about kind of dealing damage. So with that in mind, what we want to do is make sure that we get up to a position to help out the team to spot opponents. And when you're in a tank like this, you'll know that actually playing with the camo roll and being able to spot is quite easy because of all of the things that we've mentioned already. I'm trying to get out of the way of this tiger, but it keeps reversing, so not ideal. It's a hammer. So with that being said, so what do we do? Well, at the beginning of the game, because of our camo that we have in this tank, makes it quite easy to spot. And so we're able to spot the other side of the kind of area to directly in front of us. And so what we're doing here is the typical case in point of playing World of Tanks. You essentially go up to the bush and you're going to be able to see vehicles, so you can spot them through the bush when it goes transparent. But when you go behind the bush, you make effect of using the bush's camo factor. And so what you can do is you can remain undetected whilst firing through the bush. But what happens is that you're seeing here is that we can't actually spot the opponents because they are behind the bush for us. So we need to go in front of the bush to be able to spot them. So what you see me here is periodically moving forward, making the bush go transparent, spotting the opponents and pulling back behind the bush to remain undetected. And we can do that continuously. The spotting mechanic in this game lasts for in the region of about 6 seconds roughly, I believe, off the top of my head. Might be slightly longer and depends on the perks that you have on your tank. You can increase it just slightly, but you can see here what we're doing is we're keeping some of these tanks locked down and we're spotting for our team. We get spotted here, but it's fine because we can essentially finish off that Panther there, and that's more crucial than taking maybe one hit. Now the Tiger 131 is a bit triggered at us, and you see he's YOLOing around. He fires, but the reload on the Tiger 131 is good, but it isn't good enough for us to not be able to get a shot off before he's reloaded. So we put one into him, and this is kind of how you can play this tank. You get a lot of damage at the beginning by remaining undetected, and then you can play it almost like a bit of a brawler, and that's what makes this tank very, very fun, because it's very small. It's got that ability to not only, deal damage from actually dealing damage itself with the main armament, but you've also got the ability to kind of hide and avoid damage in that way as well. You can see in comparison on this MVP screen here that we are much, much smaller than the hammers either side. And we pick up 2,800 damage alongside 1,253 assistance in a 2 minute and 37 second game. So you can see just what kind of happens when you can play this tank well, and you're kind of acting as the spotter for your team whilst also utilizing your own damage potential to get the damage as well. So you can not only get assistance but actual damage whilst also remaining undetected. And that is essentially what the M56 Scorpion's very good at doing. But of course, that's only one game, and we want to see a little bit more from the M56 Scorpion and not just a bit of a steamroll from our team. So let's jump into the next game and we'll see what we have to offer there. So our next game is on Sand River. Sand River is not the best map for spotting on, to be honest with you. It has a few spots that you can use to be able to remain undetected, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of close quarters fighting regardless of what corridor that you take. And if you want to play a little bit more passively where you don't get spotted, often you're not going to be the one spotting anyone because there's going to be other people that push up before you. So what we do here, now that I know that there's a light tank on the enemy team who could potentially be battling me for the view range within the game, who could spot me first if they've got the proper good crew skills and they've set up their tank in the right way, they could spot us back. So what we want to do is make sure that we stay a little bit passive at the start of the game. You don't want to be YOLOing in all of the time, especially in a tank that doesn't have armor. I mean, that's pretty much self-explanatory. That's a definitely fast way of getting back to the garage. But what you see me here, just understanding what the enemy team are doing. We know that the light tank's over there. He's behind a hill, so he can't spot us. So what we're going to do is just stay here in this little bush. And this is one of the spots that you can use to get view range, as well as kind of remain quite hidden within your games. And it's often a spot that you can use at this early stage in the game. And when you see that the southern side of the map, maybe it fails, you want to pull back, you can do that from this position. So it's something that you can do. And what we're doing here is just not only spotting for our team, we've got very good view range, we can often spot people that are on the hill, but what we can also do is kind of get into a nice position to get damage as well, as you see people crossing like this FE201 A45 who's made his way out into the open. We managed to track him here, and you see me just going for the track again. And you can do that quite easily with this tank. The reload, as you're seeing, 5.2 seconds. We're using our enhanced combat rations at this moment in time, so it's reduced down. It's about 5.7 seconds normally, maybe just slightly longer. I think it might be 5.8 or something like that. But because we're quite low profile, you can poke over a ridge with only a small amount of your turret showing. If they hit your turret, they're going to pen. But sometimes you have to be quite cheeky with a tank like this, and what you're seeing me do here is just break the vision with the enemy tanks that spotted me, which was the E25, and so we can go undetected again and farm up some of these guys again. So the or the FE201 A45 is out in the open. And we go for a nice little tracking shot on the T25. We're not actually getting assistance damage here. It looks like he may have repaired it but stayed in position. Not quite sure how that works, but okay. Either way, now we can go for the T25/2, and it's all about kind of using this both view range as well as that damage. Often people will try and do one or the other and end up being quite scared of firing sometimes, but often you'll get experience of when you can fire and when you can't fire in your game. So at this point, I'm thinking I need to be a bit closer. Our teammate has gotten taken out, and he was the one spotting everyone for our team. So I kind of need to take up that role. Now I know most of the vehicles on the enemy team are going to be directly in front of me somewhere in the sand dunes. We've got 2 tanks spotted and there's only 3 still left alive. We've got tanks in their base, which would have spotted anyone that was camping in their base, as well as having tanks that would have spotted anyone that's kind of camping in a weird spot close to where our tanks in their base are. So we finish off this VK302D, who definitely didn't realize how much damage per minute that we have in this tank. But there's an E25 and of course the heavy tank over here, and we know that they are the last alive now because the other one's been taken out. So we can just start to push towards our opponents. And you can see simply we get spotted a few times and we've lost a lot of hit points. But the whole point is that we've tried our best to stay undetected, even in a game which isn't very favourable for staying undetected. And that's what playing tanks like this can do, because at the end of the day, a lot of your heavy tanks are going to be in the similar sort of situation where you have to try and remain undetected in periods where you can, and spot for your team in periods where you can as well. And if you start playing tanks like this, you're going to learn those sort of things, whereby even in heavy tanks you're going to be able to get assistance damage, you're going to be able to avoid damage entirely, and that sort of stuff is invaluable for when you come to try and 3-mark vehicles and stuff like that, and it's going to make things a lot easier. So that's kind of what I wanted to go for with this video. This tank is definitely a hidden gem. I think a lot of people underestimate how good this tank can be when you understand camo and you can maneuver around the battlefield and stuff like that. And if you have any questions and you want to see more videos that are like this, where we delve into kind of the nuances of stuff, why you would take certain things in the game, let me know in the comment section down below. And of course, if you want me to do specific videos, also just tell me what videos you want to see and I'll try my best to try and get those out for you. And of course, you can join me in the streams that we'll be doing more often on the channel, and that 30 days of streaming that I'm thinking we'll start tomorrow on Friday, the 16th of February, and of course be running for the entire month. So yeah, hopefully you enjoy those and you'll join me along the way, and we'll be still posting the same amount of videos, just streaming alongside. And yeah, hopefully you did enjoy this one. Let me know what you think. If you've got anything else to add, also let me know and help people out in the comments that maybe you could help out. And yeah, if you've got any more questions or anything related to anything, just let me know, and I will see you in the next one. Have a great rest of the day, and if you want to watch some more World of Tanks, how to get better and just learn the game, then this playlist on screen right now should really help you out with a lot of things that you can kind of understand within the game. So I will see you in there, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.